the fluorescent lights of the courtroom hum, a dull counterpoint to the frantic thumping in my chest. My hand, gnarled and spotted with age, gripped the worn wooden armrest of the witness stand. Edward Thompson, a man who'd always prided himself on his quiet dignity, was now the star witness in a drama I never envisioned. Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, a young woman with eyes as sharp as needles, addressed me. "Can you please state for the court why you're contesting the will?" My gaze drifted across the courtroom. There, in the front row, sat Melissa, my daughter-in-law, her face a carefully arranged mask of polite concern that didn't quite reach her eyes, which flickered with something colder, something that resembled impotence. Beside her, my son, Henry, was conspicuously absent. He'd sent a text, "Can't make it. Dad, got a meeting. As if anything could be more important than this fight for my legacy, for the acknowledgement of years of quiet devotion, years of being treated as invisible. "Mr. Thompson," the lawyer prompted gently. I cleared my throat, the dryness a constant reminder of the medication I now took daily, a consequence of the heart surgery that had brought this whole sordid affair to light, the heart surgery that revealed the family's true colors. "It's about respect," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's about acknowledging the contributions I've made, not just financially, but emotionally, to this family." The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver hair pulled back tightly, leaned forward. "Please be specific, Mr. Thompson. Specific. How does one quantify a lifetime of being the steady rock, the silent provider, the one who always put his own needs last? How do you explain the slow, creeping erosion of your own sense of self, chipped away by years of casual disregard?" I shifted in my seat, the stiff fabric of my suit scratching against my skin. "Your Honor," I began, "I spent my life building a successful business. I provided for my family. I ensured they wanted for nothing." My eyes found Melissa's again. She shifted uncomfortably, her perfectly manicured nails tapping on her designer handbag. The handbag I'd bought her for her birthday, the one she declared a little too classic before relegating it to the back of her closet. And after my heart surgery, my voice wavered slightly, the memory still raw, a festering wound. "After I almost died, I expected answer, support. Instead, I paused, drawing a shaky breath. Instead, I received a text message from my son. 'Call a cab,' it said. I'm watching the game." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge's eyebrows rose a fraction. Melissa's face flushed a delicate shade of pink, but she maintained her composure, her lips pressed into a thin line. "He was probably just busy, Mr. Thompson." The lawyer representing the estate, a smooth-talking man with a slicked-back hairstyle, interjected. "These things happen. Misunderstandings. That's what they called it. The casual dismissal, the forgotten birthdays, the perfunctory phone calls that always seemed to come at the most inconvenient times, the years of silent, simmering resentment that had finally boiled over after that one callous text message. One text message revealed a family's shocking lack of care. "Busy," I repeated, a bitter taste rising in my throat. He was too busy to pick up his own father from the hospital after open heart surgery, too busy to even call and see if I was alive. The silence in the courtroom was thick, heavy. I could practically feel the weight of their gazes, their judgment. Was I being unreasonable? Was I overreacting? These were the questions that had plagued me for months, the doubts that had gnawed at my soul. But then I would remember the coldness in Melissa's eyes, the indifference in my son's voice, and the certainty would return. I wasn't overreacting. I was simply demanding the respect I deserved. "And what about your wife, Eleanor?" the judge asked, her voice neutral. "Eleanor, my late wife, a complicated woman, a woman who had loved me in her own way, I suppose, but whose love had always been unconditional, contingent on my success, my ability to provide. She had never understood the quiet joys, the simple pleasures that I cherish. She had always been focused on the outward appearances, the social status, the material possessions. Eleanor, she passed away several years ago," I reply, my voice softening slightly. "She wouldn't have approved of this disrespect. And what exactly is it you're contesting, Mr. Thompson?" the estate lawyer asked, his tone condescending. "Are you claiming undue influence, mental incapacity?" "No," I said firmly, meeting his gaze. "I'm contesting the distribution of assets. The will, as it stands, leaves the bulk of my estate to my son and his wife. A token amount is bequeathed to charity, nothing for me, but you're deceased, Mr. Thompson," the lawyer pointed out, a smirk playing on his lips. "What use would you have for money?" The courtroom erupted in a low chuckle. Even the judge suppressed a smile. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth, the culmination of months of planning, of meticulous preparation. "That," I said, opening my eyes and fixing the lawyer with a steady gaze, "is precisely what they thought." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. They thought I was dead. Scene label. Flashback underscore one. The aroma of pipe tobacco and lemon polish hung heavy in the air. A familiar comfort in my father's study. Sunlight, fractured by the leaded glass window, painted kaleidoscopic patterns on the worn Persian rug. I was 10, small for my age, perched precariously on the edge of a leather armchair, dwarfed by the towering bookshelves that lined the walls. My older brother, Charles, 2 years my senior, and already radiating an air of confident entitlement, sprawled comfortably in the other armchair, a thick volume of Jules Verne open in his lap. Though his eyes were fixed on our father, so Charles, father began, his voice a rumbling baritone that always seemed to carry the weight of pronouncements. "I've been thinking about your future. A young man with your intellect, well, it deserves the best education money can buy." Charles grinned, a flash of white teeth against his tan skin. "Thanks, Dad. I was hoping you'd say that." I shifted in my seat, a nervous flutter in my stomach. My own future, it seemed, was a less pressing concern. I'd spent weeks painstakingly building a model clipper ship, meticulously carving the tiny masts and rigging, hoping to impress my father with my dedication and craftsmanship. It sat now on a small table beside me, dwarfed by the grandeur of the room, silently pleading for recognition. "Harvard," father continued, his eyes twinkling with pride as he gazed at Charles. "It's the only place for a Thompson, a legacy of ambition, you know. It's in our blood." He reached across the desk, tapping a thick envelope. "I've already started the application process." Charles preened under the praise. "I won't let you down, Dad. I'll make you proud." My throat constricted. "What about me, father?" I blurted out, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. The room fell silent. My father's gaze shifted towards me, his brow furrowing slightly. Charles snorted, a dismissive sound that stung more than any words. "Edward," my father said finally, his voice losing some of its earlier warmth, "you're different. You have your own path to forge." He gestured vaguely towards the model ship. "Your hobbies are admirable, but they're not practical." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing larger. "But I want to go to university too," I pleaded, my voice trembling slightly. "I want to learn, like Charles." My father sighed, the long, drawn-out sound that seemed to carry the weight of his disappointment. "Edward," he said patiently, as if explaining something to a particularly slow child, "not everyone is cut out for academia. Charles has a certain aptitude, a drive. You have other strengths." He picked up a small wooden carving of a bird, a piece I had spent hours perfecting. He turned it over in his hands, examining it with a detached air. "This isn't, Edward, very decorative, but it won't put food on the table. But I can be good at school, too," I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. "I just need a chance." My father shook his head, placing the carving back on the table with a gentle thud. "Your talents lie elsewhere, Edward. Perhaps a trade, something practical." He turned back to Charles, his face brightening. "Now, Charles, about Harvard." The rest of the conversation faded into a dull hum. I sat there, numb, the intricate details of my clipper ship blurring through a film of tears. The leaded glass window, once a source of wonder, now felt like a prison, trapping me in a world where my dreams held no value. My father's words, "You're different," echoed in my ears, a constant reminder of my perceived inadequacy. Later that evening, I snuck back into the study, the silence amplifying the emptiness in my chest. I picked up the model ship. The smooth would cool against my skin. I had poured hours into its creation, meticulously crafting each tiny detail, dreaming of the day I would present it to my father, basking in his pride. Now it felt like a symbol of my failure, a testament to my perceived lack of ambition. I traced the delicate lines of the hull, the sharp angles of the masts, the meticulous craftsmanship. Once a source of joy, now felt like a cruel joke. I closed my eyes, picturing Charles, basking in the glow of our father's approval, his future paved with privilege and opportunity. The injustice of it all burned in my throat, a bitter taste that I couldn't swallow. Suddenly, a wave of anger washed over me, hot and consuming. I gripped the model ship tighter, my knuckles turning white. With a guttural cry, I hurled it against the wall, the sound of splintering wood echoing through the silent room. The delicate mass snapped. The intricate rigging unraveled, the carefully crafted hull shattered into a dozen pieces. I stood there, trembling, my chest heaving, the remnants of my shattered dreams scattered at my feet. Years later, after Eleanor and I married, after I built my own successful business through sheer grit and determination, the memory of that day in my father's study remained etched in my mind. It was a constant reminder of the sting of being overlooked, of the pain of unfulfilled potential. It was a wound that never fully healed, a festering resentment that would shape the course of my life in ways I could never have imagined. It taught me a harsh lesson about the capricious nature of parental love, about the insidious power of favoritism, and it planted a seed of quiet defiance, a determination to prove my worth, not to my father, but to myself. A family's cold indifference sparks a father's subtle act of defiance. It fueled a desire for recognition, for validation, a desire that would ultimately lead me to this very courtroom, facing my own son and daughter-in-law, their faces mirroring the same casual disregard I had seen in my father's eyes all those years ago. The stale hospital air hung heavy, a mix of antiseptic and despair. I remember the thin, scratchy blanket they'd given me, barely enough to ward off the chill. 65 years old, lying in a bed too small, feeling like a forgotten relic in a museum nobody visited. The bypass surgery had been, successful. My heart, the doctors assured me, was ticking along like a freshly oiled clock. But my spirit, that was a different story. It felt like a damp, crumpled rag. "How are you feeling, Edward?" Eleanor, my dear wife, sat beside the bed, her hand resting lightly on mine. Her touch, usually a source of comfort, felt distant somehow. "Tired," I mumbled, the word catching in my dry throat. "And empty. You need to rest," she said, her voice gentle but strained. "The doctor said you'll be much better soon." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But a coldness had settled in my bones, a premonition that things wouldn't go back to the way they were. The surgery hadn't just mended a broken heart. It had exposed a deeper fracture, a growing chasm between me and my family. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, her phone clutched in her hand. She glanced up, offering a fleeting smile. "Glad to see you're awake, Edward." "Thanks, Melissa," I managed, trying to inject some warmth into my voice. It came out flat, lifeless. "We should probably get going," she said, rising to her feet. "Don't want to tire me out." I'd barely spoken to words, the coldness intensified. "Yes, of course," Eleanor said, already gathering her purse. "We'll be back tomorrow, Edward. Get some rest." They kissed me goodbye, quick pecks on the forehead, and then they were gone. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone in the sterile silence. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of the emptiness that now echoed within me. That was the day I truly understood. I wasn't just recovering from surgery, I was recovering from a lifetime of misplaced trust. I'd always believed family was everything. I'd worked tirelessly, provided for them, put their needs above my own. But now, lying here, surrounded by the antiseptic smell of a hospital room, I saw the truth. I was an inconvenience, a burden. The following days blurred into an indistinguishable monotony. Nurses bustled in and out, checking vitals, administering medication. Eleanor visited, her concern palpable, but her stays grew shorter with each passing day. Melissa's visits were even more fleeting, often punctuated by hurried phone calls and whispered apologies. My son, Robert, didn't visit at all. "He's busy with work," Eleanor explained, her voice tight. "Busy." That word became a constant refrain. Too busy to visit his father recovering from major surgery. Too busy to offer a word of comfort, a moment of connection. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, more painful than any physical ailment. I'd given him everything, sacrificed so much to ensure he had a good life, a life free from the struggles I'd faced. And this was the thanks I got. One afternoon, Eleanor arrived with a bouquet of wilting lily. She placed them on the bedside table, the faint perfume doing little to mask the sterile hospital smell. "How are you feeling, dear?" she asked, her voice laced with a weariness I'd never heard before. "Better," I lied, forcing a smile. "Robert called," she said, fiddling with the stem of a lily. He said to tell you he's thinking of you. thinking of me. Not enough to call, not enough to visit, but enough to have his mother relay a second-hand message. The emptiness gnawed at me, a hollow ache in my chest. "That's nice," I murmured, turning my head to look out the window. The sky was a dull gray, mirroring the bleakness within me. "He's just so busy with the new project at work," Eleanor continued, her voice apologetic. "He's under a lot of pressure, another convenient excuse." I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the hurt, the disappointment. "Melissa sends her love," Eleanor added softly. I didn't reply. I couldn't. The words felt like hollow echoes in the vast emptiness that had become my life. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into a month. I was discharged from the hospital, sent home to recuperate. Home, a place that once felt warm and welcoming, now felt cold and unfamiliar. Eleanor fussed over me, but her attention felt forced, her smiles strained. Melissa's visits were even rarer now, her presence fleeting and perfunctory. Robert remained absent, his busyness a constant, unspoken barrier between us. I spent my days in a haze of quiet desperation, moving through the motions of life like a ghost. I watched television, read books, stared out the window, the world outside seeming vibrant and alive while I felt like a withered husk. The betrayal, the indifference, it was a wound that wouldn't heal. It festered, poisoning my spirit, turning my heart to stone. One evening, while Eleanor was preparing dinner, I overheard a snippet of conversation on her phone. It was Melissa. Her voice, usually so sweet and solicitous, was sharp, edged with impatience. "Honestly, Eleanor, it's such a drag. He's just there, taking up space." My breath hitched. Taking up space, that's how they saw me. Not as a father, a husband, a human being, but as an inconvenience, a burden, an obstacle. The coldness that had settled in my bones after the surgery intensified, hardening into a steely resolve. I wouldn't let them erase me. I wouldn't let them diminish me. I would fight back, not with anger or recrimination, but with something far more potent, quiet, calculated action. I would reclaim my life, my dignity, my self-worth. They had underestimated me. They had dismissed me. And that, I realized, was their greatest mistake. A family's cold indifference sparks a father's subtle act of defiance. The betrayal, the neglect, it had lit a fire within me, a fire that would burn slowly, steadily, until it consumed everything they held dear. The courtroom air hung thick with anticipation. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting dust motes dancing in the air a shimmering gold. My knuckles, white against the worn wood of the witness stand, ached. Mr. Thompson, the opposing counsel, a slick young man named Davies, began, his voice dripping with condescension. "You claim your daughter-in-law, Melissa, exerted undue influence over your late wife, Eleanor, regarding her will. Is that correct?" "Yes," I reply, my voice steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. The heart surgery, just a year ago, had left me weaker, but it had also opened my eyes. It had revealed the cold indifference of my own family, a truth more painful than any physical ailment. Melissa isolated Eleanor, manipulated her. Davies smirked. "Isolated her, Mr. Thompson. Your wife was suffering from dementia. Isn't it more likely she simply forgot about you?" A wave of nausea washed over me. How dare he reduce Eleanor's life, our life together, to a simple diagnosis? "Eleanor loved me," I stated, my voice rising. She would never intentionally cut me out of her will. This lawsuit, this fight, it wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my place in Eleanor's memory. It was about exposing the truth of what Melissa had done. Love, Davies scoffed, turning to the jury. This is a case of an elderly man clinging to a fantasy, a man unwilling to accept the realities of his wife's illness. My lawyer, Ms. Ramirez, a sharp woman with eyes that missed nothing, placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "We'll address that, Edward." The courtroom felt stifling. The faces of the jury blurred, their expressions unreadable. Davies continued his relentless attack, painting me as a senile old fool, desperate for money. He brought up my failing health, the heart surgery, twisting my vulnerability into a weapon against me. He questioned my memory, my clarity of mind, chipping away at my credibility with every carefully crafted question. "You claim Melissa controlled your wife's communication," Davies pressed, his voice sharp. "Yet you offer no concrete proof." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. "Do you have any evidence to support these rather dramatic accusations?" I took a deep breath, the oxygen stinging my lungs. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, the culmination of months of meticulous planning, of painstakingly gathering every scrap of evidence, every whisper, every text message that Melissa thought she had erased. "I do," I said, my voice stronger now, filled with a quiet conviction that surprised even me. Ms. Ramirez rose. "Your Honor, we would like to call a witness." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Davies looked momentarily flustered, his carefully constructed facade cracking. Who could I possibly call? I had been isolated, cut off from my friends and family by Melissa's insidious campaign. The courtroom doors swung open, and a figure stepped inside. A figure I had almost given up hope of ever seeing again. My granddaughter, Sarah, Melissa's own daughter. The shock on Melissa's face was palpable. Her eyes widened, her jaw slackened. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, and perhaps, in a way, she had. The ghost of her own deceit come back to haunt her. Sarah walked towards the witness stand, her gaze steady, unwavering. She was the spitting image of her mother, with the same sharp features and fiery red hair. But her eyes held a different kind of fire, a fire of defiance, of truth. Davies spluttered objection. "This witness was not disclosed." Ms. Ramirez calmly addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe Ms. Sarah Thompson possesses crucial information regarding the case." The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, considered for a moment. "Objection overruled. Ms. Thompson, please be sworn in." As Sarah took the oath, my heart swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. This was it, the turning point. My quiet revenge was finally taking shape. The years of silence, of being dismissed and ignored, were finally coming to an end. "Ms. Thompson," Ms. Ramirez began, her voice gentle, "can you tell the court why you are here today?" Sarah took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over the courtroom, finally landing on her mother. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, before she finally spoke. "I'm here," she said, her voice clear and strong, "because I know the truth about what my mother did." The air in the courtroom crackled with anticipation. Melissa's face was a mask of disbelief, tinged with fear. Davies looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. "And what is that truth, Miss Thompson?" Ms. Ramirez prompted. Sarah turned towards me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. My grandfather, she said, her voice unwavering, is telling the truth. My mother manipulated my grandmother. She isolated her, controlled her communication, and ultimately coerced her into changing her will. My heart ached for Sarah, for the pain she must have endured, for the burden of this truth she carried. But I also felt a surge of gratitude, a profound sense of validation. I wasn't alone. Someone finally believed me. Can you elaborate, Miss Thompson? Ms. Ramirez asked. Sarah nodded. After my grandfather's heart surgery, she began, her voice gaining strength with every word. My mother became obsessed with the inheritance. She was constantly talking about it, about how much money we would get, about how we deserved it all. She started limiting my grandmother's contact with my grandfather, claiming it was distressful for her. She intercepted phone calls, screened visitors, even hid letters. My mind raced back to those dark days after my surgery. The loneliness, the confusion, the numbing feeling that something wasn't right. I had attributed it to my weakened state, to the medication, but now, hearing Sarah's words, everything clicked into place. Melissa's solicitous behavior, her constant presence, her insistence on managing Eleanor's affairs. It hadn't been about concern. It had been about control. Sarah continued, her voice gaining momentum. She even went so far as to convince my grandmother that my grandfather didn't care about her, that he was only interested in her money. She twisted my grandmother's words, manipulated her emotions, until she believed it. The courtroom was utterly silent. Everyone hung on Sarah's every word. Even the dust motes seemed to have stilled, suspended in the charged atmosphere. This was it, the twist, the moment everything changed. But it wasn't over yet. There was still more to reveal, more truth to uncover. And I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that this was just the beginning. The courtroom air hung thick and still, heavy with anticipation. My knuckles, white against the worn wood of the witness stand, mirrored the tension in my chest. Judge Mallory cleared her throat, the sound echoing in the sudden hush. Mr. Thompson, she addressed me, her voice neutral. Do you have any further evidence to present? My gaze swept across the faces in the room. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, sat ramrod straight, her face a carefully blank mask. Her husband, my son, Michael, was absent. Again, a familiar pang of disappointment, almost a physical ache, settled in my gut. He'd promised he'd be here, promised he understood, but promises, like so many other things, had become brittle and easily broken. "I do, Your Honor," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I took a slow, deliberate breath, savoring the moment. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, treated as a ghost in my own life. They all culminated in this instant. This was my moment of reclamation. I have a letter, Your Honor, a letter that explains everything. My lawyer, a young, sharp woman named Ms. Garcia, approached the stand and handed me a sealed envelope. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, the crisp paper crackling in the silence. This letter, this single piece of paper, held the key to my freedom, to my dignity. It was the culmination of a meticulously crafted plan born from the ashes of betrayal, a betrayal that began not with malice, but with a simple heart surgery, the heart surgery that revealed the family's true colors. I unfolded the letter, my eyes scanning the familiar script. It was my wife Eleanor's handwriting, elegant and flowing as always. Eleanor, who had passed away 5 years ago, had unwittingly set this whole chain of events in motion. "This letter, Your Honor," I began, my voice gaining strength, "was written by my late wife, Eleanor Thompson. It contains her final wishes regarding the distribution of her estate." Melissa shifted in her seat, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. A flicker of unease crossed her face. I allowed myself a small, inward smile. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as I began to read. Eleanor's words filled the space, each syllable a hammer blow against the wall of deceit that Melissa had built around my life. Eleanor, in her wisdom, had foreseen the possibility of this very scenario. She'd seen the subtle ways Melissa had begun to exert control, the gradual erosion of my autonomy disguised as concern. "To my beloved husband, Edward," the letter began, "I leave you my entire estate to be used and enjoy as you see fit. I trust your judgment implicitly, knowing you will always act with kindness and generosity. Should any attempt be made to contest this, I have included a separate, sealed addendum to be opened only in the presence of legal counsel." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Melissa's face had paled considerably. She knew what was coming. "The sealed addendum, Your Honor," I continued, my voice steady, "contains a detailed account of a conversation between my wife and Melissa, a conversation in which Melissa admitted her intention to manipulate me into signing over control of my assets once Eleanor was gone. She believed I would be too grief-stricken, too vulnerable to resist." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Ms. Garcia produced the addendum, a smaller, thicker envelope. The judge, her expression grave, instructed the court clerk to open it. The silence that followed was deafening. The clerk read aloud, Eleanor's words painting a vivid picture of Melissa's cold, calculated ambition. She'd spoken of wanting to secure Michael's future, of ensuring their financial stability, all dismissing my own needs and desires as irrelevant. She even suggested, the clerk read, her voice trembling slightly, that Mr. Thompson might be better off in a comfortable assisted living facility where he could be properly cared for. I closed my eyes, the sting of those words still fresh, even after all this time. The casual cruelty, the utter disregard for my feelings, it had cut me to the core. But in that darkness, a quiet resolve had taken root, a father's quiet dignity transforming into a powerful counterattack. I opened my eyes and looked directly at Melissa. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The carefully crafted facade had crumbled, revealing the raw, grasping ambition beneath. "This letter," I said, my voice filled with a quiet power I hadn't realized I possessed, "is not just about the estate, Your Honor. It's about respect. It's about dignity. It's about reclaiming my life from the shadows of neglect." Judge Mallory, after a moment of silent deliberation, addressed the court. "In light of this new evidence," she declared, her voice firm and clear, "the court upholds Mrs. Thompson's original will. Mr. Edward Thompson is the sole beneficiary of her estate. Furthermore," she added, fixing Melissa with a stern gaze, "I am deeply disturbed by the contents of this addendum. The court will be investigating the possibility of undue influence and potential elder abuse." A wave of relief washed over me, so profound it almost buckled my knees. I glanced at Ms. Garcia, who gave me a small, encouraging smile. It was over, finally over. The courtroom erupted in a cacophony of murmurs and whispers. Melissa sat frozen, her eyes fixed on the floor, the image of defeat. I felt a flicker of pity, a fleeting echo of the affection I once held for her, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of weary satisfaction. Justice, however delayed, had finally been served. As I slowly descended from the witness stand, my legs a little shaky, I thought of Eleanor. I imagined her watching over me, a gentle smile gracing her lips. She had trusted me, believed in me, even when others hadn't. And in the end, it was her quiet wisdom, her foresight, that had brought me this victory. I stepped out of the courtroom into the bright sunlight, the weight of the past years lifting from my shoulders. I was free to live my life on my own terms, free from the suffocating grip of manipulation and neglect. The heart surgery that revealed my family's true colors had also, in a strange twist of fate, led me back to myself. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet air of freedom, and walked away, leaving the ghosts of betrayal behind. This wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my peace of mind, and in that I had truly won.